All right. So thank you all for joining today. We're really excited to sort of announce the launch of Generate Plan in Revit, which is something that we've been working on for a long time. And today we're going to run through a live demo of Finch. Essentially, Artur here, who I'll introduce here in a minute, we'll be going through the workflow in Finch, and then I'll take it over at the end and show how you also would bring it out into Revit and also maybe just generate plans directly inside of Revit. We're excited about this because we think it kind of opens Finch up a bit more to, use in different kind of projects. You don't have to always get your project up into Finch in order to be able to generate plans directly inside of it. And of course, we'll touch a bit more on that in the demo. But just to start, my name is Amelia Henry. I'm an account executive here at Finch. So I primarily work with our enterprise firms, doing trainings, onboardings, and talking to a lot of you before we actually partner as well. Pamela Nunes-Wahlgren and Jesper Wahlgren are our co-founders, CEO and CPO. They're not here today, but of course, they are architects themselves as well. And I also have Artur here, who I will let introduce himself.
Thank you very much, Amelia. Hi, everyone. My name is Artur. My background is also in architecture. And just like Amelia, I'm an account executive working with existing and new partners.
Perfect. All right. So just a bit of background about where we are at right now with Finch. So we have sort of two tiers. We have the Finch Basic tier and the Finch Enterprise tier. The Finch Basic tier, this is open to everyone. All of you guys can go and sign up today if you would like. There's a 14-day free trial attached to it. The Finch Enterprise tier, this is a bit more of a selected tier. We have around 80,000 on our waiting list, which is really exciting, but also we can't open up to everyone at full capacity all at once. So what we're doing right now is the enterprise partnership. This is where we partner with select firms. It's a 1-year partnership and we work really closely with them. The main part is that we're building a custom data set. So each of these firms that are generating plans, they're actually generating from their past project, their past knowledge. So it's going to come out with their regulations, their rules, their style, and all look very, very familiar. Of course, included in this partnership is trainings, onboardings, these sort of things. And here you can see some of our firms that we have currently on the enterprise partnership. So Finch Basic, this is 49 euros a month. And as mentioned, you can already sign up to this today. I will kind of specifically go through, and Artur will as well, what's included in Finch Basic and what's included in Finch Enterprise. One of the key differences is that Finch Basic is single user. You don't have any shared libraries, whereas Finch Enterprise, this is, of course, a firm-wide account. Then you're going to have, a shared plan library to generate from. And you also have access to all of the AI features. So Finch Basic kind of stops at the floor plate level, which Artur will highlight, and Finch Enterprise continues, of course, all the way into the actual apartment generation itself. So the three sort of main values of Finch, the first one is generating plans in your style. So it's your wall widths, your door widths, your furniture. It's going to look really, really familiar to you. And this is all because of that custom data set that we build up, because what you've drawn in the past, Finch will basically generate off of that. So it'll create results that are going to look really, really familiar to you. Of course, we always want the architects to stay in control. So we do also offer a full editing suite. So, whatever you generate in Finch, you can always go through and, move a wall around, change a door, switch out the furniture. You have complete editing control of everything to do with the plans. So, you can either just take the plans and go, you're happy with them. But if you want to customize them, add your own style of furniture, you always can do that as well. So we think that this sort of combination of, I would say, the digital workflow, but also the traditional workflow where the architect is, sitting in the driver's seat is really important to combine in these sort of tools. By way of building a custom data set, we, of course, are also, creating a catalog of all of your past residential plans. This is something that is hosted inside of Finch. It's accessible to you and your colleagues on the enterprise tier. And this is essentially smart plans with a lot of metadata attached to them. So it's a library. You can go in and see, okay, where was this plan used? Where was it built? When was it built? What are the special conditions about it? And you can kind of use this knowledge to also filter results in future projects. So if you know that in some projects you need to have this developer style and be up to code of this city, you can kind of filter for that based off of your data set. So I would say with Finch, it's kind of similar to most AI tools where the input really affects the output. So this is why we have such a big emphasis on building up the custom libraries with each firm to create this really good foundation for you to be able to generate from. We also bring everything out into Revit. So we're generating, a full BIM model. It's a native Revit file. We have an add-in that lives inside of Revit, and I will be going through this towards the end of the presentation. But essentially, our walls are coming in as walls, doors are doors. It's model groups, custom families, area plans, everything you kind of need to continue on later in your workflow once you're sort of past the early planning phase. Right. And here we have a case study with one of our firms, Shepherd Robson. So they actually had a project that was a feasibility study that they weren't able to get the mix on. So it kind of shelved. But then with Finch, they were able to bring it back and develop a lot of proposals really quickly. And Tom Kyle, associate partner there, has highlighted that with Finch, one of the main benefits is that they can not only sort of solve one variation, but they can explore more ideas and take them much, much further in the same time that it used to take them to produce one. We also have another case study here with one of our French firms. So this was a bit of a later stage project. They actually had already solved the mass. They'd already solved the floor plate. And it was a competition project, and they just wanted to fill it with apartment plans, but they didn't have the time because it was due the next day. So with Finch, they were able to, design 220 apartments in 3 hours. And this is all because of that real custom data set that we've built. So, they can go in and just generate plans that are, with French furniture in the French language and of course up to their Paris codes. And this all goes really quick because of that data set. So these are sort of two case studies showing different parts of the workflow, but of course you can also take a project all the way through and work on both the mass, floor plate, and the apartments. So here we have the workflow of Finch. So you start off in Rhino, Revit, Grasshopper, or Forma. I believe Artur will be showing how to start in Forma today. And you always are creating the mass. So Finch does not generate the mass itself. This is created by the architect. What Finch does generate is the interior of the building. So we have generate floor plate. This is where we're generating our cores, our unit mixes, generate unit plan. That's where we're generating the apartments. And of course, all of this is really backed up by the Finch graph, which is checking your local regulations, these types of things. Generating apartment plans, this is only available on the enterprise tier, but with the new GP in Revit launch, this will be accessible to those of you on the basic tier for a limited amount of time, so you can go in and sort of test it out. Once you've worked through the building, you can bring it out into Rhino, Revit, or Grasshopper to continue on. Typologies that we support are multifamily resi. Within that, we do include hotels, elder care, student housing, master plan, sort of everything that fits under that residential umbrella Finch can generate for. And just to reiterate, softwares are Rhino, Revit, Grasshopper, and Forma. All right, and with that, I think I will hand it over to Artur, who's going to run you guys through a live demo of how to fill out a project in generating Finch.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Amelia. Let me just share my screen and we can go through the workflow. There we are. I think everybody sees my screen now. Very good. Okay, so before we actually go into the models and the workflow that Amelia highlighted, I would like to show you what our data set looks like. So what you see here on your screen is an Acme Architects data set. So Acme Architects is our demo organization where we have 190 different plans that you see here. And this is something that we create also for our enterprise customers. So you can look at all of this data here if you want to. You can scroll until you see all 190 of them. You can, of course, also look at the different plans here plotted in these two different graphs. And to show you what each and every single one of these is built up from, we can simply go into one of them. So in this particular example, you see that we are able to tag this plan, both based on a particular developer, perhaps a project name, a region, even a city. And then if there are any specific accessibility regulations or anything else that we need to kind of adhere to. In this case, you see that this is a type B flat, probably in the US, and it is adjusted for or to be wheelchair accessible. To show you a little bit more how these plans behave, I'm just going to switch over to a different tab where I have one of my own sketch plans open because I don't really want to change anything in the previous data set that I showed you. And this is what it could look like, right? So like Amelia mentioned, these plans are quite clever. You're able to stretch them. You're able to pull at them, you're able to shrink them. And this is all just so that they are going to be applicable for more scenarios. So this plan itself will be able to be put into several different unit sizes and shapes. And in order for us to be able to manage how it's going to be behaving when it's put into one of these different scenarios, we are able to apply these different rules. So in this particular case, we have a few different rules set up, right? So here I've, for example, locked this bathroom in order to keep it to kind of one standard. As you all know, very often you would have kind of standard bathrooms throughout a development, and that is to help you keep that, as well as accessibility, of course. Same with the passage here. And then one thing that is different is, of course, this rule that we have set here, and that is to make this bedroom extendable, but to never shrink past this. And that is, of course, to allow it sufficient facade and daylight penetration into this particular space. And so if we look at how this plan behaves once more, I think you're starting to notice that the bathroom doesn't really change. The passage width doesn't really change. But if I were to, for example, pull this further, you see that the double bed that we have here at the very bottom is indeed expanding. So in this case, you can imagine how this would then be applied to an ever so slightly different container, or even maybe something that has an entirely different sort of facade line, or maybe bay windows, or perhaps a faceted corner that would kind of change the shape of this balcony space that we have defined here. Finch is not only a generator, of course. So at every stage and every point, you are able to work on all of these elements that you see. So I can go in and I can iterate on these different plans. For example, I can change the width of this door. I can change the position of this door as well. I can, of course, change thicknesses of walls, positions of walls. I can change my furniture objects, and I can do quite a lot of different things then to not only maybe kind of improve this plan, but also create different iterations of these plans that we are going to be using in our projects. Once you've done that, you can save these as copies, and then in that way kind of enhance the data set that you are going to be working with. So that is the data that we are working with when it comes to Finch. Of course, when we get to generating these unit plans inside of a project, we will also have a couple of suggestions that are completely AI generated, and also some that are going to be coming from your own library. So just to show you what that looks like, you can see here is my library, a little bit messy. I imagine quite a few people's are. It's filled with sketches, it's filled with iterations, but this will also be available to you when you are generating a unit inside of Finch. So, like Amelia said in the beginning, for today's workflow, we are going to start in Forma. As many of you may know, we launched this feature for not so long ago. And this essentially enables our users now to do quite a lot of the early stage design and kind of iterations entirely on the web. So just as Forma, of course, Finch is also entirely web-based. And so you don't have to download anything. You can simply just log on and start kind of enhancing your models with all of this data. So here you have a Forma project. What I want to do with it, let's say that I've already kind of identified this to be the optimal shape. I have analyzed it. I have made sure that all of the kind of factors that I need to consider have been considered. So I head over to my extensions tab. I find the Finch plugin. So for those of you that are not familiar, it's quite easy to add it. So you go to add extension, find it here, approve it, and add it to this particular project or site. And then once you're in here, you simply navigate to the project that you want to work with, and you send it to any of these variants. So I can send it to this one. You see that we have a list of things that are going to be transferred over to Finch that we are going to be able to kind of consider in the next step. And you also see a few things that we currently do not support. So if we're happy with all of this, we can simply export this to Finch, and we're going to get a little pop-up on the bottom left side here that is going to take us directly to Finch. So just give that a second. And there we are. So I can open this variant now in Finch, and we can work on it. So we don't have to wait for it to load. Instead, I can jump over to here. And here we are. So this is the same variant that I just imported in. So you see all of the surroundings are the same. Of course, perhaps most importantly, my volume has also completely been transferred over to Finch. And at this stage, I can also start making sure that kind of my areas are correct. I can start looking at my outer wall thicknesses, and I can, of course, also manage the the floor heights that I have in this particular project. I'm going to jump into one of these regular floors that we have over here. And we are going to start kind of understanding this floor by placing the corridors, placing the cores, and all these other kind of essential elements for a residential building. So I am going to create a corridor typology here because I think that the width and the size and the kind of shape of this building lend themselves to be a kind of double loaded corridor typology. And so what I'm doing now is that I'm kind of modifying our optimization algorithm and saying that I want somewhere between 3 to 4 stairwells to be placed all around on this floor plate. I want my corridor and the placement of these stairwells to consider the egress distances, which you can modify here. And then also looking at a list of these different weights or kind of priorities that this algorithm is going to take into consideration, we can make sure that we have an optimal layout for our circulation solution on this particular floor plate. There are a few different settings as well. So of course you can modify how wide your walls are, how deep your cores are, how wide they are going to be. But I'm going to let all of these things be for now. One last thing that I will edit is that I will add these 2 stairwell attractors. And that is simply just to make sure that all of my points of circulation, all of these spaces that are defined for it, are going to be facing inwards. And that is simply to keep this area a little bit more clear for our unit mix. I'm quite happy with the way things are looking now. We are fulfilling all of the egress distances. You can see that by the green nodes here. So I'm simply going to apply this to this particular layout. And I like switching on the programs tab here on the right-hand side, simply just to see what is what. And clearly here we can see what we have in residential, as well as, of course, the square meterage that we have available to us, as well as where the circulation is and where, of course, my cores are. For those of you that are working in Imperial and are joining us today, I also want to say that we, of course, support Imperial units too. It is simply a switch that you have to kind of toggle on the project overview page. Like I mentioned before, Finch is not just a generator, but of course it's also an editor. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this first core is a little bit larger. Let's say that I have a couple of more functions to kind of add to it. In fact, let's just make sure that we kind of align it this way instead. There we are. And after this iteration, I can simply go ahead and generate a unit mix for this particular side of the building. Now, we could have done this in the same go. So both sides are all the spaces on this particular floor plate, but I like doing it step by step because it simply gives me more control. So I can apply one unit mix on the kind of outer side of this building, and then I can apply another one on the inner side of this building. And for those of you with an experienced eye for residential plans, maybe you're starting to kind of solve this in your heads already. And you can, of course, see that in this outer part, we maybe have slightly larger units that can afford to be a little bit deeper. And then in this inner area, we can maybe kind of populate it with smaller typologies. So maybe it's studios or something else. So to do that, in fact, I'm going to get my smallest size up a little bit, not to 52, but maybe to 42, or let's say 40. I want my medium size of units to be around 60. And let's say that my largest one should be around 86. We can, of course, also change these percentages. We can add more unit mix types, so it can be several, but I'll just leave it here for the sake of this demo. Just as in the previous optimization algorithm, we also have a lot of weights to consider here. Again, priorities. So if we were working with, for example, grid lines, you can make sure that any walls that we generate are going to sort of gravitate towards them, or that the grid lines become a little bit stickier. And you can also kind of work with things like adjacency. So how many units in a row are you going to have beside each other and things like that. One of the most useful features, though, for me is this one. So managing the dual aspect size. So here I can say that all of the units over 75 square meters should, as well as it's possible, considering this shape, be put into corners or places where there's more than one facade. And so as the iterations run here, we can see that the unit mix is quite all right for this shape. So I actually have 7.4 square meters to spare. That means my units are a little bit larger than I'm requesting, which is a good thing. I'm achieving the unit mix to 89%, and I have 5 unique units out of 9. So there's some repetition and, of course, some bespoke kind of solutions. And, of course, much of that can be credited to this unit and perhaps this one as well. I'm quite happy with the way that this mix has kind of been applied, in particular because the smaller units are at the sort of more narrow shape here. So I think they're going to be easier to kind of lay out for me. And so I can apply this and we can start looking at how to kind of get the units themselves laid out and planned. So just before we do that, I want to stop here and say that this is basically where Finch Basic stops. So you have access to, of course, all of the extensions, add-ins, and plugins to get to this space. You are able to run our optimization algorithms. And at this stage, you're also able to paste plans from your personal library. But all of the features that I'm going to be showing from this point and onwards are going to be enterprise features. And so to do that, we can start solving some of these units. So perhaps we'll start with this corner one. So we can go to generate and generate a floor plan here. So I'm switching off a few features because I'll explain them in a due time. But first, I just want to say that we are going to be looking at this shape, at the area, at the dimensions, and we're going to be giving you results from 3 different kind of buckets of information, if we want to call it that. If I had some plans in my own personal library that were applicable to this particular shape, they would also show up here, but in this case, I don't. Instead, I just have kind of Acme Architect's plan. So I have my top 6 suggestions here. And then if none of these really fit, or if you're not getting many proposals here at all, you can, of course, also look at our Finch generated. So these are our AI generated plans that you find at the very bottom of your results. Any results you see here, you're able to filter by tags. You can filter it by spaces and all of these other things that you see here. We kind of cap the results at least 75% score. And you can see, of course, the scores here in the top right corner of each and every one of these results. And when we talk about scores, so if I just apply this or kind of put it on there or try it on for size, if you will, we can see that we are judging this plan based on the unit that we're trying to implement it on by how much it's had to adapt from its kind of original size, how compliant it is, how well it's achieving the daylight requirements that we have put on it. So we usually assign that to a particular space type. And then, of course, the total score, which is kind of consisting of all of these things above. So this suggestion is actually ranked at 89%, which is pretty good. And we can, of course, go ahead and assign it to this unit. Sometimes I also like going to this tab and also just opening the original plan and kind of understanding what the original looks like. And if there are any changes that have been made that maybe I have omitted, and I need to kind of make sure that nothing has been modified beyond my control or beyond the kind of set of constraints that we have set. So again, quite happy with this one. So I can go ahead and assign it to this unit. Looks quite good to me. But of course, as I showed you with in the previous plan that we worked with, you can of course modify everything in this plan as well. So like I've mentioned a few times now, we're not simply a generator, but we are of course also an editor. So here we have a sliding door instead of a kind of normal door. And we can modify things like positions of the walls, etc., etc. In fact, I think this is a pretty good layout, so I'm going to let most of this kind of be. So there we are. The first unit is resolved. Next, I would like to go to one of these 60 square meter one. And before we do that, actually, I am going to introduce you to our graph rules. So this function is available here on the right-hand side under this tab. And essentially, it helps us to look at this floor plate as a kind of series of nodes, or essentially as a graph, hence the name. And we are able to set specific rules. So beyond everything that's already baked into your data set, into your plans, you're able to set, for instance, minimum sizes for bedrooms, like I've set here to be at least 10 square meters, or for bathrooms, which I've set here for 2.5 square meters. You can add more. And of course, this also kind of checks the rest of your model as well. If you don't really understand what this is yet, you can simply just think of it as a very sophisticated spell check for your project. So keeping that in mind, we can go ahead and generate a plan for these 60 square meter units. And in fact, here we are going to be looking at them through the kind of lens of our graph rules. And so what happens is, if I just scroll past my own kind of sketches here, we can start looking at these suggestions. So here we have one that's a 98% fit or graded at 98%, which is great. And you can see how it's also being analyzed by this graph rule, right? And on top of that, of course, this is also important to mention, we also look at the adjacencies for when we generate plans. So we understand where your exterior facade is. Given this tool as well, we're of course able to kind of manage whether it admits daylight or not. So you can imagine in a more complex shape that this can be quite important, especially as buildings kind of quite often touch. You can also manage where you're going to be accessing a unit, managed here. And of course, if this was a more complex unit, you could also simplify it to make sure that the algorithm understands what it is that you're trying to achieve. This is a great fit. The graph rule is not really telling me that there's any issues or anything to highlight. But if I, for example, scroll down to my plans here, or if I drop the score rating that we are cutting off on, I am curious to see if we're going to get a worse result, and I can show you what that may look like. Well, perhaps not. So we can assign this unit, and I can just show you what it would be like if we were to modify something here. So for example, if I were to change the layout of this unit, or if I were to, for example, kind of misplace my furniture ever so slightly, one of these nodes, when I am in the graph rule mode, will show me that there is some form of issue or something to kind of have a second look at in this particular space, right? Similarly, if we were looking at a particular area or a wall that has been moved somewhere, the graph rules will be able to tell you that there's something that requires your attention. And sometimes we will, of course, also give you results that will be highlighted in some way by these graph rules. And that is simply because we don't want to just entirely omit them. We'd rather just show you that there's something that you may want to address because, again, you are the architects, you are designers, and very often you do, of course, know best yourselves. And so kind of being able to look at this, being able to kind of spell check it with graph rules, we have applied this unit as well. We can, of course, also copy it. So I like doing it this way. I like to grab this unit, go Control-C to copy it. Then I like to head down to unique units and then find all of the units that are the same size and dimension and simply just paste it across all of them like this. I can continue doing the whole floor plate, but I think at this stage you're sort of understanding of the process required. So I would rather just jump out here and show you that we can also, of course, grab this floor plan. So this is, the floor plate. This is the floor plate that I was working with. We can grab it and we can paste it across several different floors, right? So in the same way that I was able to grab that unit, we're able to paste this across all of these different ones. And at the same time, we can, of course, also paste it across floors that look ever so slightly different. So when we do this, it's just worth mentioning, we put the circulation and all of these other things that you have in a previous floor into the same kind of local coordinates to make sure that when you are designing this building in 3 dimensions, that all of these spaces, all of these walls do indeed stack. And so we're almost done here. I just wanted to kind of show you what we can look at as we are in our massing studio now. And let's switch over to an iteration that's a little bit more fleshed out. So here's one that I've spent a little bit longer in. So of course we have kind of solutions for all of the plans, like you can see here. And if I were to go back to our massing studio, I can start looking at where my, for example, unique units are in this particular project, right? So I can see where are my smallest ones. And I can start also judging this on, is this the best position for these units to be in this particular project? I can look at where my largest ones are. And of course they are in a corner here. So maybe that is pretty good. I'm sure that your clients would be happy if you could put these in a corner like this. And then also we can start looking at space types. So what I like looking at here is, for example, if my bathrooms stack up nicely, which is a very easy way to kind of just visualize this. So imagine if you're in a, for example, design meeting and somebody just asks that question, does everything really line up? Will we be able to get vertical rises across? You can simply navigate to this tab and you can have a conversation around where your spaces are vertically. When you've analyzed your building, when you've completed this kind of process of adding more information to it, adding all these layouts to it, we can export this to Revit. So I will just very quickly show this to you, and Amelia is going to go into much more depth, but this is that same project just being pushed to Revit, right? So this is what we're able to generate through our add-in, right? We are creating proper Revit walls, proper Revit families. Everything is saved in model groups. We even generate area plans. So here you have a gross building plan. And those of you that have done this manually know what a tedious process it can be to add area, objects, or even simple room tags, such as this one. I think I'll stop here, Amelia, and hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Artur. All right. I'll go ahead and share my screen again. All right. So now I'm going to show how we would bring a project out into multiple software. So Rhino, Revit, and also show a bit about how you generate plans in Revit. So here I have a building. This is a high rise in New York, and this is a completed project. So it has a lot of data in it. We, of course, get all our key figures. It's a nice diagram, and we have all of this space type data as well. So in order to get a project that has so much information out into Rhino Revit, it's really quick. I'll start off here in Rhino. Let me just pull Rhino over. So we didn't touch on Rhino too much today, but essentially the way that our sync with Rhino works is it's both for uploading and downloading, and we actually have a live sync going on. So essentially I load in my project here. We're working with the Finch layer, essentially. That's how we're sending geometry back and forth. And any changes that I make up in Finch are actually automatically synced back down into Rhino in real time. So if I go up and change a program or, add a wall, these will just show up here immediately. And the same goes if, I want to add a floor, I move the facade, hit sync, it updates there. So it's quite a nice process if you're a Rhino person. If we want to kind of get rid of this linked model, if we want to have an actual hard data inside of the file, we can always do that basically by importing 2D and 3D. So I'll just go over to advanced and go ahead and import 3D. And what we're going to do here is bring in an actual structure that is kind of separate from this live sync. So then we're going to get real geometry that we can, edit with. And yeah, here we see it pop in there. And now this is no longer sort of subject to be changed. And the same goes for our import 2D. So we click that, and then we're going to get some plans. So what I will do is just minimize some layers here. And we see that we have a Finch layer, we have a 2D import layer, and we have a 3D import layer. So this Finch layer, this is the active one. This is, getting those syncs up. But if I just turn that off, I see what I'm actually left with in the file. And here I have, groups of poly surfaces that are representing both the internal apartment walls as well as the story walls, all sort of connected together. And so this can be really nice to just run quick simulations on right here inside of Rhino. If we just jump up to our top view, see, it's a pretty heavy Rhino file. There we go. We actually are getting diagrams in for each floor, and it's coming out like this. So this can be a really nice way to just print these off pretty quick. And within that, we see, okay, building A, proposal name, story, 21 of 40. And then if we open up these layers a bit more, this one here, we see that we have programs, but we also have spaces. So we get both layers sort of that data, and we're also getting, of course, the names. We're getting the furniture is coming in as blocks. So we can really work further with this workflow here. All right. If you're interested in learning about the Grasshopper workflows, I won't go through that today, but we do have a lot of info on our Finch guide and tutorials on that. You, of course, can do everything you can do here in Rhino, plus a lot more in Grasshopper. So feel free to have a look at that. We have a script that basically connects your building to a ladybug simulation in real time, these types of things. So it can be quite fun if you're a Grasshopper person. All right. Now we'll jump over to Revit. So here we are in Revit, and I have the same file downloaded. Just move my Zoom thing out of the way. Let's jump back up to Finch. So I have this floor plate, and I've downloaded it into Revit, and we can see that it's going to look exactly the same. So when we are bringing things down into Revit, we're bringing actual model groups in. So we see that this model group has this name, Unit 11, 2-bed, 3-person, type A. And if we head back into Finch, we can see that, of course, this plan actually has this name as well. So when we are creating the data sets, we usually work a lot on the structure to make sure that the naming systems are going to be relevant, because this naming system can follow you all the way down into Revit. Of course, you can always just rename things here. You're not sort of locked in, but same goes before. If you have a good input, if you have good data and the foundation, then it's going to follow you all the way through to Revit. So here within this model group, we, of course, have our custom families. So we have, Finch unit wall, 120 mil. This will be your thickness as a default. So of course, we can have, thicker walls for bathrooms, balconies, these sort of things. But these thicknesses are maintained. We're just basically creating a different Finch family for each wall thickness, essentially. And so after this point, the workflow is to just select all instances of this Finch unit wall and then convert to your own type of the same width. Same goes for doors. The furniture is coming in as 2D families with the names that we also have created in your furniture libraries in Finch. So same workflow there. So it's a couple minutes just to get everything in your style, and then you're good to go. We also do see that a lot of firms are sort of presenting up in Finch, actually, because the typical workflow, of course, is to prep a lot of stuff in Revit and get it ready for presentation. But I mean, with Finch, it is kind of a dynamic presentation tool. You have a really nice 3D model, you have the plan. So you can always kind of put off jumping into Revit if that's something that you would like to do. You can present a bit more and stay in Finch a bit longer before you kind of cement everything out. All right. As Artur showed, area plans, these are coming in here as well, of course. So area boundaries. And then, of course, we can create nice schedules here. I just made a quick schedule of all of our room types, the areas, these sort of things, and the total areas throughout the building. All right, but that's our Revit plugin. So now is what I'm going to show is our generate plan feature, which is really new and is inside of Revit. So here I have a building. I actually downloaded this one. I can show you guys which one it is. So you can start off in Revit and just draw your building, draw your floor plate there, but you can also just download it. You know, if you've created a building in Finch, been working with it, and then you just want to head down into Revit. So I brought this one down into Revit, and now I want to generate plans in it. And this can be a nice way if you're working multiple people on a project, because if one of you is, you know, a good Finch user, you have generated the floor plate and everything's good to go, and then you want someone else to work on the plans, but maybe they've never used Finch before, you're on a deadline, you know, then it can be really quick to just send it out to Revit for them, and then they can use the Finch library in a really familiar environment and not have to, you know, learn a new software. If you have one day until the deadline, then we can, of course, onboard them afterwards. So this can just be a nice way to get the new users into Finch as well, and allow you guys to use it in more projects. All right. So now we have this one. So what I'm going to do, we have a few tabs in the Revit plugin. So project, this is how you're uploading, downloading geometry, you know, your massing, your BIM, everything. But generate is our new tab. And if we just go ahead and click here, it's a really simple way to work. Basically, we just click the apartment we want to generate in. Then we say, pick one or more walls where you would want the entrance door. We want it here. So finish. And now we're just going to start generating some apartments. I think, let me make sure that you guys can see this with my Zoom. There we go. So now we're going to start to see some apartments popping in here. And this is sort of the first iteration of this. So you'll notice that there is a little bit of a different UI than what we have, of course, up in Finch. And in some ways, this will remain the same. For example, complex shapes are something that is not going to be probably supported here for a while, as well as the graph rules. You really don't have that overlay for you to check. But the basic and the enterprise users have access to this feature. If you're an enterprise user, you'll be seeing results from your own firm, as well as results from the Finch AI dataset, and these will all be mixed in together. One thing that we are going to add here pretty soon is separating those results out. This is how we have it up in Finch, where you see your firms first, and then you would see the Finch ones down below. But right now, they're kind of all mixed up together. You will notice that some have furniture, some don't. Usually your own are going to be the ones with furniture. The Finch ones don't have furniture in general. We do have some filters here that you might be kind of familiar with. So select region, select bathrooms, select bedrooms. So let's say, let's just move this over a bit. Looks like maybe let's say a 2-bed apartment. So I'll say that, okay, show me all the 2 beds. And let's say we want 1 bath. And let's say we want plans from North America, for example. So then we're filtering these results down. This way we can find ones that are going to be a bit more relevant for us. And turn that there. Let's see if we get some ones with. Maybe let's take a look at this one. So I'll just click this here, and then essentially we're just going to give it a sec, and it's going to drop it in. One difference between this one and the one in Finch is that I would actually kind of scroll through the results more here, because in order to drop it in, we are like building families and things like that. So in Finch, it's super instant. You can just preview every plan that you want. But I think here I would recommend that you click, see, we drop it in there. There we go. And now we've created these families. So now it's a bit faster to preview them. But in general, I would probably just scroll through the results here. And then once I find the one that I like, assign it. And then it's going to be sort of converted out into the Finch families here. All right, so let's actually take that first one. I think that one looked pretty good. Looks great. And once we're happy with it, go ahead and hit done. And now it's in the file. So this, of course, is that same process where we are bringing in the model group, we're bringing in the Finch walls, but of course it will be, your thicknesses, your furniture, your constraints. If you're on the basic tier, your results will be basically your own custom library that you have built up. And then the enterprise tier will be the Finch results as well as the firm results that you guys have. All right. But that's sort of the gist of Generate Plan. So yeah, we envision this as a way for you to get your colleagues using Finch pretty quickly, for you to just, if you have a project that already has a floor plate, I mean, there's, you can just generate right there, as well as if you have, later stage changes in the project and you just need to move a wall, regenerate, see what you get, then you can just stay right in Revit and kind of plug into your existing workflow where you already are at to save even more time. So that's the idea with that. Let me jump back to our slides. And we have a quick table here kind of explaining the difference between basic, enterprise, as well as these plan features, because I know it is a bit, they kind of overlap in some ways, so it can be kind of difficult to understand what's included in what. But this diagram basically explains that. So we have these 3 features. Adaptive plan, this is essentially the smart copy paste that all basic users have access to. Previously, you only would have access to this if you were on the basic plan, but now you do get access to generate in Revit. Of course, generating in Revit does have a few limitations, such as we don't support complex shapes, we don't have the graph rules, and then a few of those features are only available for the enterprise tier in terms of custom furniture, getting results from the AI Finch dataset, as well as, of course, us building up the dataset. This is something that's available on the enterprise tier with that shared result. But in general, the adaptive plan, this is a smart copy paste, and this is from your own plan library that you build up. That's available to everyone. Generate in Revit is sort of a limited version of our Finch generation. And depending if you're enterprise or basic, you have different customization levels and kind of libraries to work with. And then generating in Finch, this is only available on the enterprise tier. And of course, that's the team's access with the custom data set, all the rules, everything is available to you there. All right. I hope that's clear, but if you guys have any more questions about what's included in what, feel free to write in the chat. You can also write to us afterwards. So we're happy to kind of explain the differences of things. And before we jump into Q&A, I have a quick poll that I would like to launch, because it would be great if you guys could just tell us a bit about sort of the kind of work you guys are doing, the context of your firm. It's always good for us to just understand what you guys need, and so we can kind of make stuff that is going to be relevant for you. So I have launched a poll here. I think you guys should see it on Zoom. So really appreciative if you guys just fill that out. All right. So just to reiterate, we have these 2 tiers. Finch Basic, it's €50 a month, available today. You can go ahead, go to finch3.com and sign up there. And there's a 14-day free trial on that as well. You can get in and test generating in Revit, generating floor plates, course. If you would like Finch Enterprise for your firm, we'll send out some info after this about how to get access to that. But essentially, it's starting at €12,000 a year. We have multiple licenses in that deal, but that's the minimum sort of pricing that we offer. All right. I think it's time for some Q&A now. Let's take a look here.
Yes. So we had quite a few different questions. I think there are some positive reactions. There is also some kind of questions about where the product is going. So I'll just jump right ahead. And the first one is indeed about that. So Carlos is asking if we're planning to support other softwares in the future, and in brackets, it's ArchiCAD. So what does that look like for us?
Yeah, so ArchiCAD is on our radar. We actually are talking a bit to Graphisoft about it. We don't have any dates for this, but yeah, we definitely are aware of it. So stay tuned for that. But I wouldn't say it's anything that's going to come out super, super soon, but it's on our list for sure.
An anonymous attendee is asking if it's possible to fix the areas of spaces and then generate iterations based on that.
This is a great question. So we actually are working on a bit of machine learning stuff for the enterprise side. Right now, when we are generating, we're generating entire apartments. So it's not possible to say like, okay, I want the bathroom in this upper left corner, regenerate everything around that. But we are looking into that. I can't say too much about that, but I think this is something that could happen in the future.
Great. And Sarah's wondering what our experiences are when using Finch for non-residential buildings, such as schools and other typologies.
Yeah, so we are running a couple tests on other typologies right now because we do see that Finch could be used in terms of, customizing, maybe you say that section of a school is a department as units, and then within that you have different, classrooms, and those are the spaces within. So we are kind of trying to look at it that way. But I will say that everything that is released and basically ready to use tomorrow, this is definitely built with residential in mind. So if we are partnering with firms, we of course are open to investigating this and researching this together with the firms, but we also do recommend that they also have residential projects that they can, hit the ROI on. And then, of course, we can investigate these other typologies together.
And is it possible to specify a standard area so that the minimum size of, let's say, bathrooms or bedrooms is always maintained? So basically not just going from locking the lengths and widths of the room, but working with areas.
Yeah, I think this was I think I saw this was asked before you went over the graph rules in the project, Artur. But yeah, so with the graph rules, you can set up those areas, and Finch will check for that for sure.
Thank you. Is there a way to add more rules for the project, for example? So Faiza noticed that in the first floor plan that was edited, there wasn't any access door for the balcony. And is there a way to tell Finch to say always for the balcony, there will be sliding doors, etc.? So being able to kind of set those parameters.
Yeah, so I mean, we could always set sliding doors for balconies in the data set. So this is just based off of the client's preference. But regarding checking for doors and things like that, we don't actually have an alert for that. But if a space is missing a door, the graph is like broken because there's no connection between the nodes. So it becomes kind of like an error. But it doesn't sort of light up red. I think this is something that will come. We are talking to the firms about sort of what graph rules to add next because, there's always more rules that we can add, and we definitely want to add some more. So I think that will probably be one of them that comes for sure.
Great. An anonymous attendee is asking, what kind of level of effort would it require for a team to create a database and then also implement Finch effectively?
This is a great question. So because of this onboarding process, this is actually why we have Finch kind of limited. So we only sign a maximum of 6 firms per month. And this is so that we can give the time to each firm that we need to, because on the setup process, we take a lot of it. So basically, when we partner with a firm, we, go over what we need from them. They send their plans over kind of in whatever format they have. And then we're the ones building the data set. We create the implementation plans. We run the trainings, the onboardings, these sort of things. So we are pretty involved and try to make it as, small of a task for the firms as possible. So this is why we have that limit. But we find that usually when we partner, we can have a 1 month lead time added into the contract to just allow for this. You guys don't have to pay for the setup time. But usually I would say we get the data from the firms within a few days after the meeting, and then we can usually have it ready, depending on our workload. I would say 2 weeks to 1 month. And then after that, it's onboardings, trainings, and we usually have a few sessions, and the architects are good to go. So I would say less time than you think.
Yes, exactly. And just to insert off of that as well, in terms of time and resources, it's like Amelia saying, most of the things we do, and in terms of training and kind of non-billable hours that your practice has to put up for this, we usually run it in sort of 2 hours, hour and a half, and that is really it. We see that there's a fairly low threshold to learning Finch. Faiza, and I hope I'm saying that name right, sorry if I don't, is wondering if there's a way to make residential apartments to have a second floor built into the same sort of unit. And also, of course, do we do office and commercial design, which has been answered partly.
Yeah, so with the multi-floor apartments, that's not a typology we currently support. Finch does not have connection between floors. So basically, yeah, we don't have 2 floor apartments in the data set, and Finch also isn't aware sort of what's above and below it. So this is not something we support yet, but it is on the roadmap, but I think probably a bit farther out. Regarding offices, this is also a typology we have looked at a bit before. I think Finch does well with the workflow of outside in, where you have a mass, you have a floor plate, and then you fill that floor plate with units. So I think with open plan offices, I wouldn't think Finch can really work with that yet because there's so much open space, and Finch is really working with walls. But if you do have kind of these corridor offices and these types of things, it could be a supportive typology.
Very good. Are there plans to include more building programs? So I think, Amelia, you've already answered it. So if it's okay, Gabriel, I'm going to skip it. We are looking into it, but currently it is what we have demonstrated. Gabriel is also asking if there are any tutorials about how to generate the library of contents that we can later paste on the floor plate unit.
Yeah, so we do have those tutorials up in the guide. In order to build the library, it's quite a manual process. It's pretty much tracing plans and tagging them and adding sort of Finch constraints and geometry. So if you're on the basic tier, this is something that you do yourself. But if you're on the enterprise tier, we build this for you, and this is included in the contract.
Next question from an anonymous attendee. And by the way, we are trying to run through them, but I see that more and more are dropping in. If we do not make it to your question during today's session, we will try to answer it afterwards. So sorry if we don't get to it. But what are the constraints for apartment design? Is it building regulations, environmental analysis, economical factors, parking places, quantity? And then the plans are over dimensions. Staircases are taking up the facades. Corridors are superfluous. But the UIX is great. So if you could talk to the first 4 points, and then maybe if you have any comments about the kind of positioning of the corridors, etc. as well.
Yeah. So when you're generating apartments, it's kind of all of the above in different ways. So in terms of building regulations, that's handled with the graph rules, that's handled with dimensions, that's also handled with the accessibility, clear space around furniture. Environmental design, Finch is always trying to reduce material usage. We are not running any simulations on the results. It's more just trying to minimize walls, which minimizes material, which is better for the environment. But in terms of these sort of simulations, we're not running that. The other two, Artur cleared the comment. Can you remind me what the other two were?
Yeah, give me 1 second. Economical factors and parking places.
Yeah. So economical factors, I would say that falls in the material reducing as well. Parking, we are not really looking at. We do have structural grids that you can use to sort of adhere to any structural requirements, sometimes sort of guided by parking. I will say we do have some custom calculations. So as you generate, you can set up calculations that say, okay, kitchens cost X amount per square meter, or, use this much carbon, this sort of thing. And you can get those values, but we're not generating based off of them. We're really generating based off of regulations. And regarding stairwell placements and things like that, this is all kind of controlled by the user. So if you don't want stairwell on the facades, you can not use the stairwell attractors, place them other places and sort of go from there.
Very good. Another question is, are we looking into an add-in for AutoCAD?
Yeah, with AutoCAD, we have had one before. We've kind of gone in and out with it a little bit. I think this really just depends on how many users want AutoCAD. So if you do use AutoCAD as your main software, feel free to let us know, and we can always consider getting that up and running. But we found that a lot of firms are using Revit more and more. So this is kind of where we've put our development efforts.
Very good. Somebody's shocked that I have Revit running on a Mac, but this is simply because of parallels. But that is a great observation, anonymous attendee. Next question from Michaela is, when is the facade defined? There was a feeling that it was defined with the exterior of the building before uploading it to Finch. But there is kind of a really important balance between facades and the inside. So maybe the question is, how do we define the exterior facade, and how does Finch consider it, and how can we modify it?
Yeah, so the facade is designed by the architect. So Finch does not design the mass. We work on the inside of the building. So we're a bit, later into that. Of course, we have the massing tools where you can iterate and sort of update the mass over time, but you can't edit it in Finch. So if you sort of want to work iteratively, I mean, what we have seen is that, you're generating a floor plate. You see, okay, I actually need to move this facade out. Maybe I make a duplicate variant, move it out, a meter or two, regenerate, see what happens. So this is kind of the process for that. But this is not something that we work with in Finch right now. It's all about the interior.
And perhaps one of the few last questions here. So Peter's wondering if it would be possible to have another alternative generation, such as, for example, student accommodation.
Yeah. So the way that we sort of work with that student, hotel, elder care is we kind of build separate sub data sets. So we would have, an apartment data set, a student data sets, this type of thing. And then when you're generating, you can just filter for that as a tag. So we have programs as well. So you could just say, okay, and this is a student accommodation, show me student plans. We also can do this for different countries. So we, have a firm, they have an office in Iceland and Norway. We have two sort of sub data sets within their library, where if you're in Iceland, you can generate with Icelandic language, Icelandic furniture up to your code, and same goes for Norway. So it's sort of the same thing, whether it's states, cities, countries, typologies. This is how we work with it.
Very good. So, Amelia, we have still quite a few questions. I think that maybe because we are on top of the hour, maybe we wrap it up here and try to answer these offline.
Yeah, that sounds great. So as mentioned, we will send the recording out to everyone. If you're interested in enterprise for your firm, we will also send you some info about how to talk to one of us about getting access for your firm. And otherwise, we'll also answer some Q&A and send them out in the email. We'll probably have another webinar, I would say, in about a month or so, where we'll show some new features and things like that. So if you're curious, keep an eye out for that, and we'll talk to you then. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. See you next time.
Thank you. Bye.